Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Welcome to Nightlight, everybody. That was Ken Quiet Hawk who did our intro, and we do thank him. You can find him at nativestorytellers.com, and I urge you to check out the Native Storytellers. It's another way of keeping history that most of us haven't heard of or utilized ever, and it's a part of our past. So tonight we have an amazing show with Richard Balthazar. Sorry, tongue twisty. Mark has a whole bunch of information that he wants to share with us, and it feels like it's going to be an amazing show. So get your pencils and papers, because this is one you want to take notes on. So, Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, Barbara, how are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Hey, you had a great show last night.
It was, of course, Atlantis is one of my favorite topics of all time, so I could talk forever and I could listen forever to material about it.
Well, I enjoyed the 2 hours last night. It was a well-done show.
Well, Greg Little is spectacular.
Yes.
Actually, I could have baked cookies and done laundry. He was just so wound up about it all. It was amazing. So it was a fun show to do.
Yeah, and hopefully in September he'll be back with
Absolutely.
his co-author. So looking forward to that.
Well, you've got an amazing show scheduled for tonight. I'm really looking forward to this one.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to remind the listeners that the seed blessing is coming up the 22nd through the 24th at the Serpent Mound, where we had Jeffrey Wilson on a couple weeks ago, and the seed blessing that he was promoting is coming up the 22nd through the 24th, so it gives you the family something to do this weekend.
Well, I hope they don't freeze.
Yeah, the Serpent Mound's located between Cincinnati and Chillicothe, Ohio. It's going to be a nice time. It might be a little chilly, but it's still a great night out. And let's see what else. I don't think we're going to get any Portland cement kind of stories tonight. That's a reference from last night's show. But Greg even covered migrations after Atlantis sank or was destroyed. The show we did with Richard Thornton a couple weeks ago, he covered migrations from Central America. We've heard other Dennis Stone has covered transatlantic crossings. I think in prehistoric times, everyone knew America was here, and we'll be looking at more evidence in the artifacts and folklore with my ancient American colleague, Richard Balthazar. So I want to bring on Richard. Welcome, Richard. How are you?
Well, good evening. I'm doing well. I'm looking forward to talking about all of this interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And, Barbara, you had Lon on last week. Richard's going to be telling us a little bit about this discovery of an ancient coin he made 50 years ago in Michigan. So,
well, I can start with that story if you want.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. There's for some reason, as we keep going through all these shows, we keep getting all these strange stories coming out of Michigan. I don't know what's going on up there in prehistoric times, but for some reason, Michigan is becoming,
I've been reading a lot more about things happening in Michigan too that have surprised me in the past few years. One was this article about the garden plots in Lower Michigan from long, major industrial scale agriculture in Michigan and 1,000 years ago. Well, there's something going on, that's for sure. And Michigan is actually, I lived in Michigan for a few years long ago. That's how this happened. And I don't have much of a place in my heart for Michigan because I've been so many other places and researched so many other areas. But coming back to the coin, it was one of those things that total accident. I was married and had got a brand new little townhouse in Ann Arbor. I was in graduate school, and brand new. I mean, they had just finished building it. And to build it, they had taken a grader and scraped the side of this little low hill on the top of the hill to flatten the place to put the house. And right there in that fresh dirt scraped down from this, which I swear has to have been a mound, I was planting some flowers, and what do I find but a Roman coin in the dirt right there where I was planting my zinnia. And it was so utterly out of sight. It's a Roman coin. How did this possibly happen? And it was put in a box. And I didn't think much about it except every once in a while, I got this Roman coin. What do you know? So I was sensitive to reading about the finds of Roman coins around in various areas of this continent. And I read about them and learned about them. And so just last year, I guess it was, I realized, this coin that I've got lying here in this box is important. And so I wrote a little story about the finding of it and trying to figure out what it was, it was all encrusted with mineral covering and that sort of thing from having been buried hundreds of years, thousands perhaps. And I didn't know what it was. I couldn't identify it. And I put it in the magazine Ancient American, basically saying, here's how I found it, and this is what it looks like, and I want to know what it is. And why it is. And so various people responded to that article with information of, shall we say, different evaluations. And one fellow actually came across with a precise identification. He sent me a picture of the shall we say, the mint coin, which this one was clearly. And it was absolutely beautiful. I thought, oh my goodness, and he gave me the date, which was right around 303 AD, for what was his name, Maximilianus, or it was Maximilianus, yeah, because there's a Minianus also. But at any rate, he gave me the identification, so I put another article in Ancient American saying this coin has now been identified. This is what it is, and when it dates from. The question still remains is why was it there? And no one has come up with any responses on that one. And that's where my question hangs in the air. Well, if this came from the beginning of the 4th century in that location, why? How? And I can get no answers, nor can I get any answers even from the, shall we say, scholarly societies whom I contacted earlier along, and the Archaeological Society and all that sort of thing. No one will respond with anything about it because it was found in Michigan. And I'm saying it that intonation because there is a prejudice, is the only word you can use, against things that go against the academic interpretation. And the academic interpretation is that there was no contact. The Romans were never here. That the coin has some other explanation. And I got a few suggestions that were just absurd beyond words. And I tried to, be gracious about writing them and saying, thank you for your explanations. I will take it under advisement. And left it at that, of course. So I'm still waiting to hear someone tell me why that coin was there.
Okay, well, Richard, it's not uncommon to read stories about these kind of discoveries. One of our first guests, Lee Pennington, did pretty extensive article on Roman coins being found in Louisville. Caleb Atwater, and Caleb Atwater in 1820, in his description of the antiquities discovered in Ohio, mentions Roman coins being found in a cave near Nashville. I'm going to send a reporter from Nashville out there to one of these areas. But in Caleb Atwater's book, he does say that it was the coin was dated not too many centuries into the Christian era. So, okay, what's it, like 200, 300, 400 AD?
Exactly, same date as mine, yeah.
Yeah, that's that date seems to appear in books. A book written in 1820. Your discovery in the 1960s. Yeah, that just seems to be something. The date just seems to be something of significance. And
I would agree entirely.
Yeah, and
totally.
You do. Yeah. What was you mentioned there? Like there was some of the like soil encrusted on the coin.
Well, it wasn't so much the soil; it was a mineral incrustation from accumulated moisture in the soil around the coin. It was a white kind of incrustation almost, like a salt or something like that, or a crystal.
Yeah. Were you able to be able to read anything that was
yeah.
written on?
The the picture that I put in the article of that coin, you can make out various things on it because I've adjusted the color so you could see through a lot of the incrustation, and you could see the form of the person on the back and things of the face on the front and all that sort of stuff. It's just that they were all encrusted with things, and you couldn't make out some of the stuff. But the image that the guy sent me of that coin is absolutely crystal clear, and I put that in the second article so people could compare and see what it was.
And these two articles are in editions 119 and 121. Just give
think
Wayne.
That's the ancient coin found is 119, and the identified is 121. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so what are some of the challenges you encountered as you were trying to find out more about this time period? Yeah, you already mentioned a little bit about the academic, and it's just you contacted a lot of people.
A lot of people contacted me. Is what it boiled down to. As a result of the first article, a lot of people contacted me with their ideas and explanations, and there were many, including a woman from northwestern Indiana along the Huron River, not far down from Ann Arbor, who she and her brother found Roman coins when they were little kids along the Huron River in a mound. It was washing away. And she wrote me about that, and so that was back probably in the 40s or 50s, because she was an old woman like I'm an old man. And we commiserated a lot about all of these old memories. But anyway, she was one response that was well worth noting. I can't recall her name, but she's in the article. There were a number of very strange explanations for why it got there. But the most interesting was a fellow who was a specialist in Roman history, and he explained that right then was the big persecution of the Christians in Rome, and enormous numbers of the Christians in the Roman Empire really fled. Now, they had access votes, and there's a good possibility that many Roman Christians bringing Roman coins came to this continent. That's the conclusion that I like to believe. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Barbara, Rick Osmond has in his book I think it's the 9th Roman Legion.
Yeah, it's the 9th. The 9th Legion, they think, was here, and up and down the Mississippi and the Wabash, there are the remains of what appear to be Roman forts.
I did read something about that once. Yes, I recall.
Yeah, and they were pulled off of building Hadrian's Wall. They just kind of disappear for 25 years, and Rick's
the entire legion, along with all of their camp followers and along with all of their horses, and only one person returned after 25 years.
Oh my goodness! That's how we know, I assume, because one person came back. The guy who came back,
The guy who came back was also given the governorship of Petra, I believe. Mm-hmm. So he must have done something quite spectacular. Yes.
Wow. Mm. Well, that certainly would explain, how the presence of Romans of whatever faith or military rank, being here in the valleys of the Wabash and the Huron and all of that sort of thing running up there. Yeah.
About the same time frame, too, I think.
Well, I would expect so, yeah. Yeah, because 100 years later, Rome was over with.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Rick's book is The Graves of the Golden Bears, and it's all in that book. It's a great book.
Yeah, so there might have been two different the Ninth Legion was building Hadrian's Wall. They might have been leaving from England. Richard's scenario sounds like they could have been leaving from Italy
or England.
Or closer to the continent. More continental departure place. So you have people from two different areas converging on North America. It's all about the same time.
Mhm.
Yeah, and don't forget that the copper mines up in Michigan and Wisconsin have been they've been functioning for the last 9,000 years, and Rome certainly went there for copper as well.
Totally, yeah.
So, and Richard, you had the usual comments about, a guy, a veteran returning from the First World War, dropped the coin on what would later become your property.
Well, not so much my property, but that hill. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So you get all the usual comments, but the more we do these shows each week, we just can't rule out that these ancient people were also naval engineers. Even Maria Wheatley spoke about that a little bit. Some of the sailing that had to go on, at least across the channel, to get the people like the Amesbury Archer across the channel.
Oh, absolutely.
So, and Nero had his floating palaces where he tried to kill his mom on that Lake Nemi or out in the Pompeii Harbor or something like that. They had a really good understanding of shipbuilding.
Well, speaking of shipbuilding and shipping and that sort of thing, we have to understand that even the Sumerians had large ocean-going boats, and they really plied the seas around Africa and Asia and that sort of thing in these big boats in 3000 BC. And there's every reason to believe that they probably were up in the British Isles area and all that sort of thing amongst the megalithics and the tomb makers and the Stonehengers and all of this sort of thing, that there was some kind of a presence even there because of the seafaring.
No, it just seems like all this trade that was going on is just natural human evolution.
It is.
Just connecting with people to different parts of the world. There are books like The Lost Colonies of Ancient America where the Amorphae jars were found in Brazil, and there are also other some Roman shipwreck found off the coast of Honduras. So isolated coin is just part of the bigger picture of human travel.
It's a microcosm. It's a microcosm of the macrocosmic concept we're dealing with here. It's just that one little grain of sand. There's that one little coin right there. But when you start looking, you realize that there's a lot more than that all around. It's just one. But I feel privileged to have found it and to have had it for these years because I feel it's very symbolic. And I don't mean to sound crazy, but I feel it's symbolic that I've got this coin from that long ago when I'm this interested in things from so long ago, too. Anyway.
So, it's your coin has been dated. You got your majority of your answers. You're still looking at the possibilities of why it's here. That Christian persecution does fit into the date of the coin. That makes sense. What else are you looking for to learn about this coin?
I realize that there's no way to learn the specifics of that coin, but the general explanation of the time that brought that coin there is really what I'm getting through you and other readings at this point, to understand that there was a Roman presence in some fashion around here and interfacing with the mound building cultures, because they were. This was in a mound. I will claim that till the day I die. This coin was from a mound right behind where my little house was put. And in my second article, I suggested if someone wants to put together an expedition to go up and investigate this thing with a metal detector and that sort of thing and all the permissions, let me know, and I might even go along.
Okay, I hope it gets to happen.
I don't think it will happen, but I put it out there, and if someone wants to, to organize an expedition, I can point them in the right direction. But I'm not about to do that. I've got too many other interests afoot than pursuing this little coin. So, and apropos of that, the other interests that I have afoot are the things that I have done articles on for Ancient American, because it all ties in with my intense involvement with a lot of ancient American stuff, not only here in this country, but Mesoamerican stuff and Aztec things, the major themes of my life.
Yeah, and Richard, you've had 40 years of working with Aztec artistic materials, artifacts as a museum curator. You're working with all kinds of materials that.
Well, I do have to correct you. I've never been a museum curator.
Okay.
I have simply investigated as an independent researcher. I've looked into all these materials and learned about them and that sort of thing. But the fact of the matter is, most of my approach to it has been artistic, because I've been after the iconography, in particular, of the Aztecs for the past 30 years, 40 years. And my artwork is developed around that. So that the show I'm doing now, I'm in various places around, are icons, big black and white icon drawings of various Aztec deities. And they're very intensely detailed, but they're designed for a coloring book. And that's what the show is that I'm traveling around now with.
Richard, what got you interested in the Aztec culture and art?
Where did it start, you say?
What got you interested in it?
Oh yeah, it was a sheer fluke when I read somewhere about the structure of the Aztec century. The Aztec century being 52 years, and I thought 52, and I looked into it, and a little bit later in the same book, it explained that it had this count of 52, which was 4 times 13, just like a deck of cards. Got that? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It blew me away. Well, really, but it wasn't just the fact it was 4 13s. It was how they counted the years. Because they counted 1 through 13 4 times, but they counted across the suits instead of down the suits. And their suits were different names: Rabbit, Reed, Flint, and House. So the years counted: 1 Rabbit, 2 Reed, 3 Flint, 4 House, 5 Rabbit, 6 Reed, and so on and so forth. And it was the most elegant system I'd ever seen. I thought that's fabulous. And it led me into the calendar, which counts 13, 20 times to make the year, and with symbols for the days and the gods that ruled them and all that sort of thing. And that's what hooked me. I thought, oh, this is spectacular. And I've been working artistically at it now for over 30 years. The first thing I wound up doing was, again, almost 28 years ago. I did a book on the Aztec calendar with my art in it, based on images from mostly the Codex Natal, which is one of the Aztec codices. And I called it Celebrate Native America, an Aztec Days. And it explains the whole calendar and gives a lot of horoscopic stuff about the gods and the weeks and the days and everything. And really, it was beautiful colors, really incredible colored work that they printed in Korea for me. But this book sold fairly well, and it's out of print now. But I wanted to mention that it is available for download as a PDF from my website for free. Everything on my website is for free. This and many other things. Celebrate Native America is, you just hit a button and you've got it. My website is www.richardbalthazar.com. What else? And that was the first thing I did, was this 4-colored Aztec calendar. And then over the years, I have focused on doing these black and white icons that I've told you about
mm-hmm.
the deities. Yes?
Yeah. And one of the, I'd say one of the really interesting deities that is in the Rio Grande Sun article has this. Wait, let me scroll down here and find it. You have the artist had these. Oh, there it is. The profile. There are 3 profiles, and the hands are outstretched, and around each of the profile's left eye, there is like different symbols. The bottom one almost looks like a mask.
I'm trying to picture this because I get the feeling that it might be the singers on the side of the old coyote icon.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, they are singing. He's the god of choral singing, and those figures are singing And those figures around their eyes are tattoos.
Okay.
Plain and simply.
Yeah.
Whether they mean anything, I haven't a clue. But
I was
they're
just
real.
Okay. I was just really intrigued by this artistic motif. I wasn't sure what it meant.
It's authentic from actually, it's based on some images from the Codex Vaticanus, those three choral singers with the song symbols coming out of their mouths. That's called Cruciat, the song symbol. And that image, that icon that you're referring to, by the way, is the noisiest one I've got on the bunch. There is all kinds of music and singing going on in that icon. There are all little designs around the drummers and the flute players and this sort of thing. And notice that the coyote himself, Coyote, is howling. Those little marks up from his nose is his howl. And this is a very, very, very noisy icon.
Well, I just really like the detail. There's just something. It was just begging the question. What does all this mean? And you got the different headdresses. It's just really intriguing of the costumes of the Aztecs. This is what we're kind of talking about up to about the 9th century A.D.
Oh, no. Aztecs are from about 1400 to 1500 A.D. Yeah, I mean, they're real late. But you have to understand, most of these icons are not really Aztec. There's only one Aztec god in the bunch, and that is Huitzilopochtli, the hummingbird of the south. He was their war god. He's the one that they brought with him into Mexico. And when let me have a drink of water a second. When they got into Mexico, they basically adopted the culture and the religion and the mythology that was there. And so all the rest of these gods and the things that I'm working on are really not Aztec. They're coming from deep in the Mexican background, many of them with roots amongst the Maya, possibly the Olmec even, but who knows. And they have survived and transmuted through various cultures, things like the Mixtecs and the Zapotecs and the Totonacs, and I can't even name them all. And these continued those traditions which the Aztecs then adopted, and now we call all of that Aztec. So that's the point I always want to make, is that, these aren't really Aztec gods. They're Mexican gods. But Mexican is a misnomer too, because we call it Mexican because that's taken from the tribal name of the Aztecs, the Mexica. And so even when we refer to Mexican, we're still saying Aztec. And I don't know what to call it other than Mesoamerican, because it's a progression through various cultures. Anyway, I'm beating on a drum that I'm sure other people can express better than I.
No, it's very interesting. When we had Richard Thornton on a couple weeks ago, just tell us a little bit about the Mesoamerican migrations to the Gulf Coast regions, southeastern United States.
I totally love the whole subject, and I follow Richard's blog religiously and eat it up. Anyway, continue. You do talk about a lot of the artworks are personifications of the natural world. It's just very interesting to see all the
the detailed artwork. I'm sure a lot of the listeners are familiar with the vibrant colors and like Barbara, what's the guy that's supposedly driving the spaceship?
You're thinking of that image.
Palenque.
Yeah, Palenque. That's it.
The coffin lid of Pakal. I know. I've read about that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've studied that one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's just all that really. It's kind of like almost closer to the hallucinogenic imagery from the Book of Kells. It just get all this very intricate artwork. The
detail. You hit upon one of my themes. If I might interrupt here, because I do believe this too, that a large amount of the iconography and the imagery that we get from the ancient Americans, if you will, was heavily hallucinogenic, that they indulged in enormous numbers of hallucinogens across the societies, but usually in a ritual sense. I mean, almost always a ritual sense. There was no recreational use. And that is what formed their artistic vision. I really sincerely believe that in the Aztec codices. You go into the Codex Borgia and you think, whoa, these people are on something. Because it is that striking, that psychedelic almost from the 1400s, you know.
Yeah,
I wanted to add too, though, that apropos of the hallucinogenics and stuff, I show them in the icons. The icon for Mayawel, the goddess of Pulque, and the one for her husband Patecat, the god of medicine. There's all kinds of hallucinogenic plants all over those icons, from peyote to marijuana to morning glories to you name it. And they're doing mushrooms. Their pictures, these are based on real images in the codices of people sitting around at a party holding psychogenic mushrooms. You know, it was big stuff. That's why it's all so weird, as far as I'm concerned. But I love it anyway.
Yeah, and you know, Richard, your use of the adjective "striking" is very appropriate because that it's just what it is. You know, we really don't understand it as well today, but it would have had a lot more meaning, you know, 500, 600 years ago.
Spiritually, yeah, it was a spiritual condition. It wasn't a fun thing. It was a spiritual experience to do these things, and it was the root of their aesthetic and their religion and that sort of thing. I mean, we don't understand that what it would be like, because it's simply not in our world. It's an outlaw kind of thing, you know. But their world was so utterly different. That's what's fascinated me so, is to just try to conceive of what it was. But again, that's another drum I won't beat on at the moment.
But you know, so you know, you had this vibrant artistic culture. I'm sure is colorful. You know, you're making the case that at some point they are migrating out of Mesoamerica. They make it to, the Gulf Coast regions, central part of the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like Richard Thornton was saying, I really sincerely believe that. Yes.
Okay, and you get Richard was talking about that Mayan blue color.
Right, I know about that one. Yeah, I don't remember what it's really called, but except Mayan blue. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know the official name for it either, but we do have samples of we talked about this. I think when Dennis was our guest, I think it was like the base of one of the mounds at Poverty Point has the same dimensions as kind of like contemporary like plaza, pyramid.
Oh yeah, the city layout is explicit. Yeah, Richard Thornton is showing that it's just explicitly the same city layouts for these different cultures in different places. In Mesoamerica and
Yeah, and they're all using the same unit of measurements, and it does work. The same unit of measurement does work at both places in Louisiana and Mexico. So there is more evidence of the migrations coming to America, but you're also focusing on some of the artwork, like the plumed serpents, was brought to America as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that concept?
About the concept of coming from Mesoamerica.
Yeah, and the plumed serpent.
Sure. Yeah, that was in my article in number 116 of Ancient American, the plumed serpent in North America. And I just basically reviewed images of the plumed serpent through the cultures, the Olmec, the Maya, and Teotihuacan, and then leading into the Aztecs and actual Aztec pictures, showing that this theme ran all the way along through Mesoamerican culture. But then I brought up an image that I did from my first book about Indian mounds. It was an image of a plumed serpent from a shell cup in Spiro, Oklahoma, the Caddoan, Mississippian area. Spiro, Oklahoma is, if you get a chance, go. The images, the artwork around Spiro are staggering. They were huge numbers of shell drawings. This is a serpent with wings and horns. Hello, horns. And this is very like the what in the devil's the southwestern one. I can't even remember what it's called. Doesn't have wings, but this is a Mississippian one with wings. And then there's other things that tie in. And I tie in actually the serpent mound as very possibly being another representation of the plumed serpent, because Squire remarks in that 1840 survey that there were these sort of flanges off from behind the so-called head, which he speculated might be plumes like the plumed serpent. And we're talking 1840. He wrote this, so I brought that into and a few other things. But I really believe that this ties into so many things here. That this plumed serpent theme as a deity. Ties in with a theory that I had for my first article about where the Aztec calendar came from. I won't even try to summarize it because you need to read it. It's almost mathematical. And I come to the conclusion that there's a good possibility that the Aztec ceremonial calendar originated in Chavin de Huantar in Peru. Anyway, this at Chavin de Huantar, the culture also revered the jaguar, basically the word jaguar, the man jaguar. And they also worshipped a plumed serpent. And it would seem that this, shall we say, complex of man jaguar, plumed serpent, and calendar as a kind of religion may very well have been brought up the coast because the Chavin de Huantar were seagoing people and crossed over to the Olmecs and fed into the Mexican and then into the Mississippian world, so that it's kind of the American theme, Pan-American religion symbolism almost. That's an article that I'm planning hopefully for another upcoming issue. And I've raced through this thing because I didn't dare get into the details. But I do want to return, and I'm sorry to dominate it this way, but I need to say these things.
No, go ahead, Richard.
In my article, in number 11, I have to get my glasses to see what number that is, 118, called Mesoamerican Influences in Mississippi, being the Mississippian area. I brought up my discovery of a shell gorget that I found for sale from a guy. And a gorget, by the way, is a great big kind of pendant made out of shell that you hung around your neck on a cord. And they would engrave these things with pictures. There were many gorgets that came from Spiro that are really knock your eyes out. But this gorget came from Muscle Shoals area of northwestern, or was it eastern, northwestern Alabama, I think it is. And the guy who had it had various things he was selling on the internet, and this one came up. And I tried to buy it, but he just couldn't find it, whatever that meant. But I had a picture of it and the background of where it was found and stuff. This gorget has a face in the middle of it, odd kind of stylistically, but it's not that odd when you start to think Aztec. And around it there is essentially a serpent surrounding him. But the serpent's head is the day symbol, the first day of the year in the Aztec calendar, this Coat. Cipactli, the earth monster, is the first day of the year, and that's the first image that shows up. And then there's another one over here of another day sign, vulture, and then there's another two at the bottom of the day, flower. And the most important thing is that there were four symbols sort of around it, spaced around, which were all the same one of earthquake. That's a day, a real honest-to-God day. And I show in the article how the day signs that appear there are virtually identical to much fancier day signs that come from the Codex, I think it's Laud, if I'm not mistaken, from Veracruz area. Identical images. The important thing is, though, that the four earthquake signs around this face, four earthquake is the Aztec day name for the current fifth sun, the world we live in. There were four other suns before, were the fifth sun. And that would mean, if this is for earthquake in the Aztec symbology, that the face in the middle of this is the face of Tonatiuh, the god of the fifth sun, from Mexico. And it was found in Alabama. That was the point of my article. And I elaborate with some other gorgeous, some beauties, including jaguar men and eagle knights and turkeys and things like that. But I feel very proud of this article because I really felt like, hey, this is sort of like the Roman coin that I had. Here's this picture. I don't care if I own it or not. This is real. I know where it came from, and it's a piece of Aztec calendar in Alabama. I get excited. Forgive me.
No, you're allowed to express your excitement on Nightlight. I think it's fascinating. We're having a good time listening to you.
I'm glad you find it that way. I'm glad you enjoy that, and I hope that people will find a way to read my articles because I feel very strongly about them. They were, thoughts that I've had for years that I finally found a way to get them out to people. And Ancient American is a treasure to me for exactly that reason. That these curious things that I run across, I can send to Wayne May, and generally he will take them. The latest one I have in with him is not coming out in this issue, but it will hopefully make it into July issue, and that has other connections. I've mentioned to Mark that it's about Ancient America, Asia coincidences. So it's a little more speculative, you might say, than some of the other things. But
we'll get.
Yes.
I was just going to say we can talk about speculation in a minute, but since we are still talking about your article in edition 118, you also make another interesting comparison between the Mesoamerican artwork and how it changed over time and over space once the people we're just converging at one location or so and exchanging ideas, and you are focusing on the development of the turkey symbol, and you do provide
the turkey symbol is wonderful. I love that.
It's worth to spend a few minutes talking about. I really like it too.
Oh, I'm glad you do, because one of the icons I've done is the jade turkey. His name is Chalchuxtotolin, and he was the god of military glory. And it may sound odd to have a turkey as a god of military glory, but you have to understand how aggressive turkeys are. They are very aggressive and obnoxious creatures. They're like geese. And so that's why it got this military cachet, if you will. And it's very potent symbol of the militaries, though there aren't any turkey soldiers. There's jaguar soldiers and eagle soldiers, but not turkey soldiers. What I brought up in the article is that the image of that came from the Aztec codices of the turkey is very varied and sometimes really magnificent. But every one of them has this strange kind of tuft of feathers coming out of its breast, straight ahead. And when I saw that, all these years, and when I was drawing it for the jade turkey and things like that, I thought, well, what on earth is this? And then I found, in looking for shell gorgets online, I found an image of one from Alabama of a turkey, and it's really quite elegant too. There were a lot of turkeys on the gorgets around because it was apparently a military symbol there too. And this turkey has exactly the same tuft of feathers coming out of its breast, and that's Alabama. So it's yet another piece of evidence, and the turkey image is just wonderful, just a wonderful thing. Anyway.
Richard, just to back up for a minute, when you're talking about the gorge, the Alabama shell gorget that has the face and the crocodile and vulture, earthquake and flower in a circle,
right,
and circling the head. How do we read the icons? Is there?
Well,
or understand?
I'm not too sure how to exactly understand it, other than just a kind of image of the god and the fifth sun. People are very familiar with that Aztec calendar stone, which is really the stone of the suns. That's the same thing. That face in the middle is Tonatiuh, and it has the four lobes of four earthquake around it, and it also goes deeper into the mythology even in that image. But this is basically the same image in a different style from Alabama, because it's got its four earthquakes and his face in the middle, and the other days of the calendar around the stone of the suns, they're all 20 days are around the circle there. This only has the first and the last and a couple in between. So there's no way that it's not Aztec, and it doesn't have to be. Wait, I take that back. There is a way that it isn't Aztec, because this is before the Aztecs. The whole concept of the fifth sun and Tonatiuh was, again, Mexican. It had been there for centuries in the mythology, because they were all living in the fifth sun. And so this image came to Alabama very, very likely well before the Aztecs took charge in Mexico. This probably came from the early Veracruz area because of the images of the Codex. And it could have been Totonac. And Richard Thornton has remarked frequently on the Totonac connection with the Southeast. So I feel that this plays right into that. Okay,
and speaking of Richard, he was talking about his Creek heritage, and you do include the Chickasaw folklore, how they spoke about they were descendant from Mexico.
What the source said, and I'll just read it because I got it in my hand right here. I was given this letter, or at least document, that was written by a man named Worley from back in the 30s, who was WPA sort of conservator. He was trying to figure out what was there before they flooded everything with all the 40 dams. And he wrote, from talks with Chickasaw people there, these Indians in this locality were the Chickasaw. They were originally the Toltecs of Old Mexico. They were much more cultured than the people they lived among, and had to fight continuously to survive and wished to move to a more favorable location. They then sent 3 young men, professional runners, in 3 different directions to try to find a different location to move to. These runners were gone 2 years, and when they returned and gave their reports, one described this local territory as ideal. He's referring to Tennessee Valley, River Valley, saying it was good hunting, mild climate, good ground for planting, many clear streams and springs as a source of good water and good fishing. They gathered together everything they could bring with them, and even the bones of their gods, and came afoot from old Mexico. When they came to a river, they gathered logs, burned them off to proper length, tied them together with vines, and crossed. Guess what river that was? I bet it was the Mississippi. When they arrived here, they were much pleased with this location. They wished to disconnect entirely from their former people, so they renamed themselves the Chickasaws in honor of the young man who discovered this location. I was just blown away when this guy sent me this piece. This is the guy that has that 4 earthquake gorget, as I call it, and he sent me a photocopy of this guy's handwritten thing saying this. The whole thing about Toltecs is, of course, a misconstruction. No one really knew the ins and outs of who was who or anything like that. It was all kind of mythological. So they're saying they were Toltecs doesn't mean they were Toltecs. It could easily have been the Toltecs that drove them out. But that's neither here nor there either. I mean, it's just too clearly it happened. Here's a tribe that the Chickasaws came up here, and they know the guy who found the thing was named Chickasaw. So I'm willing to accept that as history myself.
Okay. And, Richard, you just mentioned that was a sample of folklore that came out of the 1930s, and the TVA's work with salvaging the mounds before the valley was flooded to make the Tennessee River. But you do also bring up these codices books that just has more of the artwork instead of the surviving examples of just folklore. So how many? You're talking about the Codex Borgia.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Several others. Vindo Bonensis, Codex Nuttall, Eagle Knight. Several different.
It's wonderful names. Wonderful names. You'll get used to them. Yeah. I really fell in love with the codices. I collected off the internet the images from all of them. I have all the pages of all of them, and I've studied them ins and out. They're so fascinating. And again, to toot my own horn, on my website there is a thing listed under art. Says Ye Gods, the Aztec Codices. And there is a whole treatise, if you will, about all of the surviving codices with examples, a couple or three from each of them, and discussing what goes on in those pages and stuff like that. Again, it's free. You can go to my website, hit a button, and download a PDF. It's yours. So I won't say anything more about that one. But I will mention about the codices, though, just in general. that there are several different kinds of, and codices are picture books. There's no written language. They're all pictures, heavily drug-infused, if we might add. But they tell stories. They tell mythological stories. They show mythological situations. There are some historical ones that show real people and images of conquests or whatever, but again, there's no words. It's symbols for different places that they've taken or whatever. And there actually is one codex, the Nuttall, which, well, actually a couple others do it too. Picture a specific man, eight-deer jaguar claw, who was the king of Tonga or something, way back well before the Aztecs. And this king is always shown. You can recognize him because it's got his name, 8 deer, the calendar symbol, and a little jaguar claw. That's his other name, 8 deer, jaguar claw. He was a major mythological hero of Mexico. Not Mexico, but Mesoamerica, if you will. And it's fascinating to see honestly a picture supposedly of that person. And you really have to think that it probably does look something like him because he has this very specific face tattoo. And he also, this is hard to say because people will say, what? He has a large beard. Yes, a lot of the Aztecs had beards, no question about it. Even the gods have beards. And this king's beard is quite remarkable. And it's a picture of a man from the 14th century. I think that's rather special. At any rate, amongst the codices, some of them are calendars, that calendar I was talking about. Very beautiful images. And they're very different styles. They're really something else. And the major corpus, if you will, however, are what's called divinatory codices, manuscripts. And they are the religious ones that are used for casting horoscopes and God knows what else the priests had cooked up around them. You really have to just meditate on some of these things. What on earth are they driving at? And oftentimes it's not on earth either, you can bet that. But those are the fascinating ones, really fascinating ones for me. Codex Borgia being one of the most spectacular. It was named not because of anything to do with it. It was sent to the Pope by Cortez as a gift of conquest. And it was that was Pope Alexander VI Borgia, okay, and it went into the collection of his nephew, Cardinal Stefano Borgia, and so that's why it's the Codex Borgia. A little bit of trivia here. I love trivia too. But the codices are a source of endless fascination because they are a source of endless questions. And usually it's, what on earth do they mean by that? The juxtaposition of elements and just the images themselves are boggling at times. There's some really hallucinogenic images of serpenty beings and demons and all sorts of things. Apropos of which, I hate to run off on this, but one of my icons, which is the one for the obsidian butterfly, Itzpapalot, is now in process of being turned into a mural in the town north of here, Espanola. These friends of mine have an organization called Moving Arts Espanola, which works with at-risk youth with arts programs and broadening education and all this sort of thing. And they are doing a mural of this icon, not the whole thing, but most of it, and coloring it because it's designed to be a coloring book. They'll figure the colors. And this thing is going to be 14 feet tall and 8 feet wide. So I'm just really thrilled that this is happening. And I'm going up there tomorrow afternoon to talk to these kids about the whole thing of the codices and gods, and this goddess in particular, and meet them and see where they've gotten on the layout and the coloring. I'm totally pumped, but that's enough there too. So,
Richard, you mentioned that the Codex Borgia was sent to Pope Alexander the Sixth. I'm sure, like the Codex Vaticanus is probably sent to the Vatican.
It's somehow or another it wound up in the Vatican. Yeah.
Does that mean that most of them, of the codexes or codices, have been or being curated at the Vatican?
No, not most of them. The way that all worked, and it's a pretty gross story. Upon the conquest of Tenochtitlan, Cortez very quickly sent various prizes of war, if you will, to rulers around Europe as gifts. And amongst the gifts there were these various codices he collected from who knows where, but different areas around Mexico, because they weren't all Aztec per se. Some were Zapotec and God knows what else. They were sent out before the book burning. And the book burning is what most people don't know about. After these, there were 15 of these codices sent out to Europe, and so they're in different places, the Palais de Bourbon, France, Bourbonicus, and things in private collections and stuff. When the church moved in behind the conquistadores, and it did it quickly, it proceeded to burn anything that burned, because it was all devil books, and all of the ritual stuff that would burn if it was wood. They burned the temples. Most of them were wood. They burned all the manuscripts in huge bonfires. The priests oversaw these bonfires, and they literally incinerated the culture of Mesoamerica. Bingo. They proceeded to do a similar thing when they went later into the Mayan area. But in the central Mexico, basically the literature and the heritage, at least combustible heritage, of the area was destroyed. So these 15 codices are all that's left for us to see how they saw themselves or the world. And again, that's what fascinates me about them.
Mm-hmm. The artwork just really pulls you into something that is not really a part of our culture, and gives you a view. It gives you a great insight into another region, another time. It's just I've just really enjoyed learning more and more about an area I didn't know a whole lot about. I'm learning along with a lot of the other listeners. You're just giving us a great education on interpreting the artwork.
Well, thank you. That's really what I'm doing. Yes, indeed. Kind of absorbing it and reiterating it in my drawings and that sort of thing. It's all things that they saw as icons, basically, that I'm using in my images, and it's trying to tell the story of the deity of that icon the way the Aztecs would have told it in their picture writing. And one example of that is the icon that I mentioned, the hummingbird of the South, who was the Aztec war god. That icon is special in this series because it actually has a narration that runs down the side from the upper left down and across the bottom to the other side. And it's a pictorial narration of the legend of the Aztecs' migration. And it literally, there is an account written by a priest who interviewed someone way back when. And so I've got a Aztec-style pictorial narration of their wanders and things that went on, which were many of which were unspeakable, until they come to the promised place, which is the place of the cactus, Tenochtitlan, a little island in the lake. And that's where they took root, if you will. So in the image that I've got going there, then it leads into the narration of the growth of Tenochtitlan through its merchandising capability, if you will, and its military conquests to wind up with their sacrifices to go to the temple up in the upper right, the temple of Huitzilopochtli, the god of war, and he's all in the middle in very grand feathery glory. But he is the one Aztec god, and so I did him right. I gave him the whole story of the Aztecs coming from supposedly the land of the seven caves, which I won't go into. That's even more of a stretch, down into Mexico and making the civilization of the Aztecs. That's what I mean. These icons have stories.
No, I'm. Like I said, I'm not a scholar of this. I'm just very eager to learn another aspect about world history, and in another example of this, how the same image was brought to America and changed, or is it adapted? But in like the you do mention Oklahoma. There's the it's in your number 118 article where the subject of the drawing is wearing this, say, Toltec style cap and armor, and he is doing the traditional Mayan kneeling. And this image was also found in Oklahoma, in Oklahoma artwork. Is Oklahoma, like maybe the Spiro Mound, is that one of the locations where we can maybe have one that pinpoint with a little bit more accuracy where the southern migration met with some of the native people, and there was a lot more interaction in Oklahoma, and that's where you get this idea suddenly emerging, but it becomes adapted by the local people, or is there a better location where there was this interface between the two cultures and a big exchange of ideas?
I know what you're asking, yeah, and I believe you've hit the nail on the head. I believe that Spiro is kind of a transitional spot.
Okay, that's a better term.
Yeah, that western edge of the Caddoan Mississippian was basically in contact with the Mesoamerican and Mexican, I have to keep saying Mexican, sphere, but also with the Southwest. The whole Chaco Pueblo world out here, they interfaced with that too. That's why there are horns on the serpent, the winged serpent in Spiro, because that's the southwestern image is the horned serpent.
Mm-hmm. And it was plumed in Central America.
Oh, right, yeah. But the Mississippian folks, well, actually, see, the influence from Mexico coming through Spiro was encountering the Mississippian cultures, who were, in their roots, also Mexican. So there was a similarity, if you will, and I believe, at least my reading of this is, that the later influences from the, let's say, the 12, 13, 1400s coming through Spiro, because Spiro was at that point too, sort of led a cultural shift across the southeast, which is basically called the Southern cult. I can't even go into the various pieces of that cult, but the things like the Jaguar Man, Gorget, and the Eagle Warrior from Etowah and that sort of thing, those are Southern cult images. And they relate really strongly, as I've shown here, to in the article, with the images from the codices of the Jaguar Knight and the Eagle Warrior. So it just explains to me that cultures were moving through here constantly, and the later wave that came across was the Southern cult. It changed the kind of art and images that were happening in the southeast.
Hmm. Well,
and you have to understand, I am not a historian. I'm a speculative historian. But I look at these things and it seems to read to me.
I'm enjoying what you have to say, and it just sounds like what other historians have discussed, and like I said, the book, the Signs of Power, that does have a chapter that discusses the similarity in measurements between Poverty Point, Louisiana, and Central America. That's a mainstream history book, so the
connections with Poverty Point and what?
There's some archaic era site in Mexico that both use the same almost like megalithic yard measurement to lay out the size of the mounds.
That. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it's not like you're an out there alternative historian making these speculations. You get the mainstream academic people just discovering some of these same connections, and it shows up in some of the DNA tests as well. Again,
I know.
The Kennewick man having Asian genes. What's he doing in? Yeah, his body was found in some stream in Washington State, and he was like 10,000. Walked over to America 10,000 years ago. So there was some kind of diffusion going on.
Just within the past month, I read a press release, if you will, on, forgive me, MSN, about a discovery on an island off the coast of British Columbia. Rather large island. I can't remember the name of it, but that doesn't matter. And they discovered, as they were digging on this thing, that island had never been glaciated. Great big island. And it had been populated. They found a settlement way down below in the digging from, I believe it was 12,000 BC. That's 14,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
There were people living there because there was a fireplace and a little bench and some various things that were buried. And that really gives you pause. That was before they supposedly came across the Bering land bridge, which is an absurdity. But, they date that at, 10,000, 11,000 BC, I don't remember. But anyway, that was my news break that I felt thrilled by. Oh, yes, okay, good. We've got something here to sink our teeth into.
Now, was that just a habitation site, or was there a burial associated with it?
I didn't know at that point about a burial or anything. It was a habitation site, though.
Okay, well, they can
with
get
artifacts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure there was a fire. They can get the charcoal sample, but they got it. The charcoal samples, radiocarbon, and that sort of thing, and that's where the date came from. And there were some fire tools and sticks and things associated with it too. Okay. I was just wondering if there was if there happened to be a burial nearby, which if the DNA test was done.
Yeah. Unless they're really lucky and find one in this pit that they're digging, I don't imagine they're going to spread it out to dig too terribly large, but who knows? Who knows? It would be wonderful to discover something that would tell a tale.
Yeah.
A telltale tale.
Yeah, it would just be interesting to see if there's another Asian person who either walked or built a boat. And
I'm willing to believe that it was boats, because even in 10,000 BC, the Jomon from Japan were sailing the seas. They would sail the whole Pacific. So I have no problem with the notion of people coming over on boats from before,
Okay. And Barbara, the conversation you had last night with Greg covered the haplo. DNA, and that his points were interesting. It's really a fascinating study. Like this haploaxis have like a few. It does show up in prehistoric America, but that it's not a very large number of people that have the gene. It's very mysterious. Where's that coming from? Where's that coming? There's some, all the stuff that some of our guests have spoken about shows that there's some kind of diffusion, worldwide migrations going on. Greg's points about the haplo X gene being in America was just very interesting.
Well, I think what was fascinating was it's everywhere that they said that Atlanteans went when Atlantis was destroyed.
Mm-hmm. So there's another.
And primarily with the Iroquois. The Iroquois seem to have a great abundance of it.
I really have not followed the DNA studies at all. I have to admit I'm not that technological.
Well, neither am I. The only reason I was fascinated with it was because I did 23andMe and I knew what my my group was.
Oh, indeed, I'm sure. Yeah, I understand the motivation.
Yes, I am not one of the. At least genetically, I am not one of the descendants of the people that fled Atlantis, sadly.
Well, my
very
my
disappointed.
Sympathies. You have my sympathies.
Well, thank you. Well, that's the only reason I even understood it.
I didn't catch that.
I mean, the haploid group. I had seen. Who was it? I think it was Rick Osmond that talked about the haploid group and groups at one point, and
that sounds like something he'd bring up.
Yeah, it's something. No, you know who it was? It was Brad Olson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Brad does. Yeah, can talk about that in depth as well.
Well, no, I'm very superficial with it, so I can say it, and I know what it is, and that's about it.
You got one up on me, definitely.
But these so many of the guests we've had on our show for about 7.5 months now. Many of them have really made some great points about these migrations. All the they presented just various convincing artifacts, folklore stories, and I think Richard's added a lot tonight with by interjecting artwork into the migration stories. And just one more piece of the puzzle of what was going on in prehistoric America. Like it just kind of sounds like it was basically a huge metropolitan area where everyone's like stopping through on their way to doing more trading or coming here for religious purposes.
Mesoamerica was even more than that. It was for all intents and purposes, a culture area, not unlike a country of our size. We are a culture area, too. It happens to be rather big. Don't worry about what the culture is. But that culture area had various dialects in amongst it of different peoples, many language groups, and there was a general kind of trend of, if you will, civilization that swept through them and with centers of activity over the centuries, starting about 10,000 BC. because things got rolling in the first millennium BC. It really did, all over the place. And the height of the Mayan civilization, which is taken as the major, is about the time of Christ to 800. That is not to say that for 1,000 years before that time of Christ, it wasn't really an eyeful, because it really was. But their classic period was the several hundred years after Christ. And that culture that fed through them and into the rest of them is, these are the remnants that you can see in the pictures that I put forth, like the images of Quetzalcoatl, one of those articles from the codices. These are images that come from the deep, deep past of Mesoamerica, and most people don't really grasp the flow of the culture area's dominance, because that's really what it was, from the Olmec into the Mayan and into the rest of the Xochicalco and all the rest of these things leading up to Mexico City. It's pretty integral, if you will. It's unified, and a large portion of it, of that unity, is that triad, religious triad of winged plume serpent, jaguar, man, and calendar. I mean, that's the best I can put it together in a nutshell, I guess, is that these are the last little glimpses we have of pictures from that culture, of that religious triad, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Richard, since we've been looking at these images from a really distant past, is there any connection to the figures at the Nazca area, like the little spaceman thing? Is that?
I've considered that as I've looked at the Nazca lines and the other set of lines. I can't remember the name of them, and I don't see any stylistic really connection. I really don't.
I wasn't sure about that, but since we're just kind of looking, this is about one of the first shows we've been looking at Central American art. I just wanted to include it. I wasn't sure about that either. I just wanted to throw it out there. And
yeah, it's not only is it stylistically different, those lines, but it's a different idiom. The way you say something, the idiom that develops in Central America, from Peru even too, is more ornamental, if you will. That's the only word I can come up with at this point, ornamental. You ornament something. It isn't just a picture. It is ornamented. And it has patterns on it and extra little frills and this, that, and the other. The Mayan art is very much that way. You look at it, my God, look at all these curlicues, and I can't make out what's going on in here in this complexity. It's a different idiom than those lines in South America, which, to my mind, it tells me that the people that did those lines were not the same people as some of the other peoples in Peru who were doing ornamental things like the Chimu. Their ornamentation is a style unto itself. It's really quite remarkable. And other cultures in Peru have their own kinds of, oftentimes geometrical styles, but even they are not like the lines in Nazca.
Richard, wonder a little bit about the artwork. I found it Chaco Canyon, and I guess there are a couple other places in your just general vicinity.
Oh yeah. Well, there isn't so much that you find artwork out here as you find petroglyphs, and I guess they're artwork, but they're drawings on stone. And the thing here, petroglyphs here, all over the Colorado Plateau, as a matter of fact, date way back into the pre-Fremont people, and then even amongst the Fremont, and then the Chacoans types did it, and so there are styles that run through these peoples also that are really exceptionally interesting and intriguing. They really are. I've taken so damn many pictures of petroglyphs, and I've just sort of filed them away. What am I going to do with these? But this brings in one little topic that I did think of mentioning, which is about the Southwest. And it's a book that I just recently finished reading called The Lost World of the Old Ones, Discoveries in the Ancient Southwest by David Roberts. And this looks like it's Norton. At any rate, he is basically, if you will, a travel explorer writer. Not so much an archaeologist, but with leanings that way. And he really knows how to research things. And he's written that this is his second book about the Southwest. The reason I bring it up is that it has something in it that I looked at and said, yes, yes, this is what I knew was going on. It's an archaeologist from Colorado or Utah, I think it is, who has this theory called the Chaco Meridian, archaeologically based, in that there's the notion of the Chaco civilization in the middle of New Mexico, basically, is the mainstay of southwestern archaeology, of course. It was the epicenter and peak. The Chaco civilization supposedly just, get this, disappeared. But the fact is, it didn't. And this archaeologist shows how apparently the population of Chaco transferred at a specific time when they abandoned Chaco. They moved north to a populated area, which now is a town in New Mexico called Aztec, but that's neither here nor there. The Aztec ruins are the second Chaco, and they were on exactly the same longitude as Chaco. I mean, it was zip-bang north. And you have to understand that Chaco had roads running out from it in all directions, straight as an arrow for hundreds of miles. And this one was a road, boom, north to that place. And they populated that heavily as a culture center for about 150 years and then left. And right at that point, the city to the south of the border of New Mexico, in Mexico even, called Paquimé, which is exactly on the same meridian, if you will. I think it's 107 degrees. That may have just been a figment of my imagination. But anyway, 107 degrees is Paquimé, which arose right at the point that Aztec declined, and it basically flourished for a couple hundred years and then disappeared. But right at the same time, apparently, further in Mexico at Culiacan, the same kind of city arose again, right at right on the 107-degree meridian. So this is what the Chaco Meridian is all about that he's talking about in this book. And I think that it is just fantastic. I don't disbelieve that they would keep on a north-south meridian. Why not? At least it's a direction, and very few directions are pointed out to us. like north and south. But so anyway, I wanted to bring that up as a plug on Mr. Roberts' book. It is well worth reading. There is so much more in there about the Fremont and the various other areas. You'll love it.
I was reading Gary David's The Orion Zone that some of the petroglyphs in Chaco Canyon show that there was a supernova.
Oh, yeah. Apparently there's an image of that 1054 or something like that it was.
Right.
Yeah.
It's 11th century supernova, and that seems to be a pattern that an event that really was interpreted as some catastrophic event, or really captured the people's attention.
I think that it definitely captured the attention, because whatever it was beyond spectacular.
Yeah, and
beyond
the pattern
spectacular.
is just
and whether or not
pattern,
it caused ruination or something, but just the thing of this vast light in the sky. How else do you categorize it except something supernatural? And that's how it becomes a symbol.
Yeah, and it just seems like the pattern was repeated throughout the desert Southwest, and
they all saw it. They all saw it. You did that.
Yeah, it was just another interesting point about all this. So much of the artwork you've spoken about tonight, and as we wind down with the last a few minutes of the show, talking about petroglyphs. This is Richard, you just did a terrific job of just giving us new insights into a world we really don't talk about all that much on Nightlight. You may not hear it all that much on other shows, but
that was my intention.
You're not letting us forget history, and I just thought this was just a really different show for Nightlight. It was terrific, great information. It was just giving us a new learning experience.
Well, I'm pleased to have done that, because I'm a teacher from long ago, but it's been a very long time ago, and I've always enjoyed imparting knowledge of whatever kind to whomever will accept it.
Okay, and we have I don't know 4 minutes or so, and we need to give you a chance to plug your website. You have a upcoming event associated with the opera.
Sure. Let me do a plug real fast. A couple things.
Sure.
About the website again is www.richardbalthazar.com, and there's all kinds of pull-down menus. You just sort of fish around, you'll find all kinds of things. Amongst the things you'll find will be my first book I want to mention, because it was my first love, mounds, Indian mounds. And this book is called Remember Native America, The Earthworks of Ancient America. And it reproduces a lot of the Squire and Davis surveys and things from the Cyrus Thomas volumes as a travelogue of Indian mounds. 1992, mind you. So it's way out of date at this point. There's a huge amount more. This book is available on the website also. Just hit a button and share. It's a PDF. You got the whole thing. It's out of print, but it's still available electronically. excuse me. The other point of news is, as excuse me again, as Mark mentioned, I have an opera scheduled to be performed. It isn't really my opera. It is Tchaikovsky's opera called Joan of Arc. And I've translated this baby into English for singing in English. And I did it 40 years ago for a different situation. I reworked it for this one. And it's going to be done by the New Orleans Opera on the 7th and the 9th of February next, 2020. I'm just pleased as I can be, and hope I'll be able to get there and see it performed. But anyone who wants to go to New Orleans and see it, I highly recommend it. It will knock your socks off. So I guess that's my plugs.
I'm going to go mark my calendar.
Okay, and it sounds like Barbara's already getting ready to make a road trip.
Oh, yeah.
And let's see, you're going to be working with art and some youth in the area. Good luck with that project. Last week's show we kind of touched on journal writing and how art help Poe to work through almost like post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. So, hopefully that can be used to help out the situation there. So, anything else in the last minute, 2 minutes or so, you want to cover? You get all 116, 118, editions 120, 121 from Ancient American Magazine. You go to their website, ancientamerican.com, and get the order the PDFs or order the actual magazine. Send Wayne down to the post office to get some cardio exercise, carrying a whole bunch of magazines to send out to everyone. So, got anything else, Richard? Do you want to plug?
Well, I just wanted to return to a picture to steer people to if they will go and see issue number 116, because there's also a picture of a shell cup from Spiro, Oklahoma, also circa 1200 AD, which has winged, cat-headed serpents with horns. 4 of them.
Mark, it's time to say goodnight.
It is time. Oh, yes, it is.
It is time to say goodnight, yes.